Diamonds are amazing. Think about it. Maybe you're wearing one of them right now on an earlobe or a finger, but just picture for a second where those diamonds came from. They were formed maybe 150 miles beneath your feet, under intense, unimaginable heat and pressure. At that time, there was no oxygen to breathe in the atmosphere. There was just carbon dioxide and other gases that would just kill you. And there was no life anywhere, apart from the tiniest, most primitive single-cell organisms, and they themselves were adrift in one giant globe-spanning ocean. It would be another 3 billion years until those microbes had evolved into us. And it would take the same amount of time for those scintillating little rocks to work their way up far enough near to the surface of the Earth that we could then find them. Everything after that was down to us. Everything after that was an industry, and we now call it the diamond industry. It's been around for thousands of years. The last couple of hundred of those years have been dominated by one company, and it still does to a large extent. That company is called De Beers. And today's podcast comes from a small, unassuming little office in central London, where there's a group of 50 technologists who are looking to, in a very real way, rewrite the story of that industry. A few years ago, De Beers decided to incubate within itself a startup that would transform the way people looked at and understood and bought and sold diamonds. That company is called Tracr. Tracr is bringing together a set of cutting-edge technologies such as IoT and scanning devices and especially blockchain, along with a partnership network around the whole global industry, to build a platform that will allow us to know in minute, excruciating detail the backstory of every diamond produced in the world. What Tracr and the people working there, and De Beers as a whole, and indeed the industry as a whole, will tell you is that the narrative, the story of natural diamonds is an overwhelmingly positive one, even though there have been dark periods. Knowing about a diamond, being able to watch everything about it from its origin within the community and the mine that it was originally found in the earth, all the way through to how it eventually ended up on your earlobe, is vital to make sure that the natural diamond industry continues to be and grows to be even more of a positive story for everyone. We were lucky, as part of the Tech for Good team, to go down there recently to talk to the CEO and CTO of Tracr, along with a couple of folks from Accenture. Accenture have been supporting them on their entire journey to find out what it has meant to create a disruptive, innovative startup within a company as ancient as De Beers, itself 135 years old. And that company within an industry that's even older and even more traditional. What are the hurdles that you need to get over? What are the technological challenges that you need to do? And most importantly, how are they going to make this change the world? I hope you'll find this conversation interesting. So first of all, some quick introductions, I think. We've got Wes Tucker, CEO of Tracr. We've got Caroline Glassberg Powell, CTO of Tracr. That's basically the two people that own this whole thing, as far as I can tell. And then we've got Hilary Allen and Vinod Nair, both of whom herald from Accenture, who have been deeply involved in the whole Tracr story. But what is Tracr? Wes, just give us the headline. We're in an elevator. You've got 30 seconds. What is Tracr?
Yeah, thanks. No problem. And you'll know that I always push the stop button in the elevator, so I get longer than 30 seconds, just so you can prepare yourself. But Tracr in its essence is it's a company, and we build, operate, and run a blockchain platform hosted in the AWS cloud. And the purpose of the company and that platform is to provide the origin, the provenance, the impact, the story of every natural diamond in the world. And we started at the position where we start at the source, we start at the place where diamonds are mined, we create a digital twin of that diamond, and then we track that diamond all the way through the value chain to the point where people listening to this podcast, you go to a jewelry store, you buy yourself a piece of diamond jewelry, and the idea is there is a diamond there that has been tracked on the Tracr blockchain, and we can surface all sorts of information about that natural diamond to tell you a rich, meaningful story.
Right, and this is something, I should apologize right now, by the way. There's someone with a pneumatic drill
trying to access the rich seam of diamonds under the streets of London, or get a free tube ride, one of the two. But anyway, sorry about the noise. Tracr's trying to do something that the diamond industry hasn't seen before. And the diamond industry, it's probably fair to say, the industry itself's been around for thousands of years, obviously, could do with this. So give us a sense of the problem that I suppose De Beers through Tracr is trying to solve.
Yeah, sure. De Beers in 2017, they looked at what was happening in the world, not just in diamonds, but in all sorts of products, things that people buy, other luxury goods, and the concept of and the need for consumers to know where things come from. Where were they found? Where were they manufactured? Was it ethical? Did they look after the environment along the way? Was a trend that was just increasing over time. And they sat down and went, well, how do we as De Beers, but also as the natural diamond industry, how do we get ready for this trend that's definitely going to come, and it's going to impact everything we do in the natural diamond industry? So that's where we founded Tracr, and they created this company. They spun it up within De Beers with the purpose of using a very new technology on the market, blockchain. We created a private Ethereum blockchain, and a few of the other nice, cool, buzzwordy tech things that are out there, the cloud and IoT and analytics, etc. And really to try and position something that the whole diamond industry could adopt to be able to react to this trend that I guess, then it was looking on the horizon. I think today we can see it's definitely arrived, and we're lucky to have something like Tracr that's more mature and ready to address that trend.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tracr is a dynamic, interesting, nimble startup organization within a much bigger one. De Beers obviously is huge and ancient, 135 years old. We will come and have a chat about that in a minute, because I bet there were some interesting challenges around there, and in particular, our friends from Accenture can help illustrate that a bit. But let's just talk about that technology a little bit more. Caroline, when somebody says the word blockchain to me, because I'm slightly simple-headed, I think, well, that's presumably a monkey NFT. But that's not what we're talking about here, right? Can you explain to us what blockchain has enabled you to do? What is that technology? How does it work?
Yeah, for sure. So blockchain at its core is what's known as a distributed ledger. So it's basically like taking a shopping list and ensuring that that shopping list is replicated in multiple different places. And you add stuff to the list, and then that list is made sure to kind of be up to date, and everyone has the same version of that list ultimately, and that list can never actually change. So when you see in the news about all of this stuff that's going on with crypto and whatnot, that's technology that uses blockchain at its core, but it's not actually blockchain. So we're quite keen to dissociate ourselves from kind of all of that hoo-ha that's going on, and we're focusing on what the core thing is, and that's this notion of a distributed ledger. And so how Tracr uses the blockchain is we record every change that's made to a diamond on blockchain. It's written once, it's there, and then if you have that data, you can verify that the changes that you've made to the diamond are on chain, and therefore you can verify and say, yeah, my diamond's on chain. And so that's pretty much all we use blockchain for, but it's a really powerful technology because it assures people that the data has not been corrupted.
Got it. So the other thing, and bearing in mind this is the Tech for Good podcast, and we tend to find ourselves repulsed somewhat by the whole cryptocurrency thing, mainly because we know that it's so energetic, right? There are so many downsides, but actually this works in a different way, right? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so briefly, the really environmentally intensive blockchains, they use what's known as proof of work. So basically, you have to do lots of really complicated calculations in order to be a member of that blockchain network. But Tracr uses a slightly different type of blockchain, which is proof of stake. And so basically, we have trusted people who are on the network, and we allow them to contribute to the blockchain without them having to undergo lots of very, very expensive calculations. And it's those really expensive calculations that mean that NVIDIA run out of GPUs, and that, the price of all this hardware just keeps going up. That's not the underlying technology of the Tracr blockchain.
Right, yeah, that does seem to be somewhat opposed to our sustainability mission here. And I think that there is something that's incredibly valuable at the core of the idea of Tracr, which quite apart from being hopefully the solution to transparency and accountability within the whole diamond supply chain, right? But it's also saying and this is part of how we sustain our planet as well. But coming back to you, Wes, if you don't mind, and then I'll come to our Accenture friends to build on this a little bit. Explain to us how interesting, I'm using the word interesting advisedly, it has been orchestrating a fast-paced startup within a company as old and traditional, I suppose, as De Beers.
It's something I'm personally quite passionate about, is the concept of innovation and transformation in large enterprises. And I think that's why we work a lot with our Accenture colleagues who have very similar large clients and do similar journeys. So, in my mind, I always think about it as like a satellite orbiting the Earth. So if you're trying to do something small and innovative, and you're trying to shift an industry or shift an organization, you launch this thing, and if you launch it too close and it's too close to the core, it kind of ends up getting sucked in and maybe crashes and burns into the planet. But if you push it out too far, it spins out and it disappears into nothing. And so, I think the balance when I think McKinsey calls it new business building. Like when you're trying to build a business within an organization, the challenge is trying to maintain that orbit, if that makes sense. And so there's a lot of good, and then there's a lot of challenges that come with that. I think on the positive side, you've got a company that is 135 years old, that believes in the industry and is willing to stand the test of time. When you look at other industries that have tried this, they've generally failed. And there's a lot of reasons, one of which is trust and bringing everybody on the journey. But the other one is just having the perseverance to kind of stick it out. And so we're very lucky to have De Beers and Anglo-American in that respect. We're also very lucky to have them in the sort of outsized access you have to support and to the industry. So if you were just a little startup, the ability to get, exposure to all sort of the best and brightest minds in the entire industry would be quite difficult. But because of the reputation De Beers has, because of the sort of the network that it has, we have that access, which means that when we build something, we're building it with a really good understanding of what the industry actually wants. So that's really positive. On the other side of that, there are some challenges in that, we're expected to move very fast. We're building technology. We're hiring people that are, they could go work for cryptocurrencies, for banks, for small Silicon Valley startups. We're using advanced analytics, we're using blockchain, we're using cloud, we're using DevOps. Like all of these skills are in incredibly high demand. And so we've got to balance the understanding of how do you attract and retain that talent? How do you build a culture that can keep those people inspired and energetic, while at the same time sort of working within the normal construct of a mining company that has 10-year investments and long-term views and lots of policies and procedures, etc. So we have, I think in 2023, we've done 9 separate audits of Tracr, the Tracr blockchain, the platform, the organization. There's no startup at a sort of a pre-revenue phase in the world that would have to do that. So we've got this constant balance between too far out, we're too much of a startup, we kind of spin away, and maybe too close, we're not nimble enough to be able to react to the industry in the way that we need to. So it's I guess a little bit that's my job, is balancing between De Beers, who are our founders, our investors, our sort of parent company, and then the industry with which we're trying to service, and constantly balancing the balance between those two things, and then every now and then actually stepping into the organization and hoping that we're building what we need to build and we're servicing the needs of our customers. So it's never a dull moment, I can tell you, running a company like Tracr.
No, I bet. And Hilary, if I can come to you, you'd know a thing or two about innovation in a company. Just to colour in my comments just now, maybe you could explain to other people why I say it is you might know a thing or two about that.
So for De Beers and Tracr, I have 2 hats. So I'm the client account lead for De Beers, but I'm also the innovation director for Anglo-American, which means I am responsible for helping Anglo-American figure out what the future might look like and how you innovate in the pursuit of getting to that future. And that can be anything from technology. So Tracr has quite a core technology focus while delivering a human good and a net positive outcome. But then you have places where it's more cultural. So how do you ensure that your organization is better able to adapt and respond and be more entrepreneurial? Or it can be more in a proposition. So what is that next business you're going to launch? Why are you going to launch that? And what's your right to win in that industry? Because that tends to be quite important. And I've extended, I'd say, experience of innovation within Accenture. So I've worked in our Global Innovation Centre, the DOC. I've led platform innovation for Europe, and I'm also a member of our What If leadership team. And what that has shown me is that innovating inside of large organizations is incredibly challenging for those people who take it on, because large organizations are at times fundamentally opposed to the process of innovation. They like certainty and guaranteed outcomes. They have stakeholders who are incredibly risk adverse, and you have budgetary cycles which are annualized in order to meet shareholder reporting. And if you want to do something such as Tracr, you have to find people and partners and ways that you work around that, so you're able to manage the balance of a stakeholder who is fundamentally risk adverse while taking on something which has a lot of both known unknowns, things you know you're going to have to solve, and then unknown unknowns, stuff you just never knew was going to be a problem, and then having the flexibility from your parent organization, but also the agility within your teams and your people so that you can pivot and respond to the needs as they emerge. And I think what Tracr have done in terms of being able to build that agility and flexibility into the ways of working while also maintaining the relationship with the parent company in terms of De Beers has been incredibly impressive, because that stakeholder management is such a huge part of successful what we call intrapreneurship, so the discipline of innovating within a large organization.
Great, and Vinod, you've been doing that, as in we can. There's the concept of being able to achieve these things. You're the guy who's actually been helping Tracr to do it. So, explain to us what this looks like operationally for you from an Accenture perspective with Tracr.
So operationally, again, Accenture has been working with Anglo-American and De Beers for over a decade now. We started our engagement with Tracr somewhere around end of 2020. So obviously, when we started it, as Wes pointed out, it was a startup organization, and the goal for Tracr was, to move into a platform which is adopted by the entire diamond industry, and it's on the journey. I think it's getting there. It's a stable platform. The technology is robust. It's scaled now, with where Tracr is at this point. And we've been, what I can call out is it's one of those things where my experience of working with Tracr, it's been challenging because when we first got onboarded, the ask from Tracr, or what we wanted to do was stabilize pilot and get the organization and the culture for moving from a startup culture to a product-centric organization, and that's what we worked together. There was obviously a lot of lessons learned, which allowed us to scale the platform, and that's where we are. So
yeah, and Wes, to come back to you, I think Tracr has been on a cultural and a structural journey as well as a technical journey, I guess. And so you are currently the CEO. I'm not sure if you were to start with, because presumably there was this process, right, where Tracr was an idea, but then it needed to become a company. And how would you recall that journey? How easy and simple and straightforward has that journey been to kind of evolve a company within a company?
And when you say currently, I mean, you don't know something I don't know, right? That after this podcast...
I can talk to you
All
about
right, good.
that
No, that's fine. So I am currently the CEO of Tracr, hopefully through Christmas and into the new year. But it's true, I wasn't always a CEO. I joined De Beers as their head of digital transformation. And I think what Vinod was describing was this kind of journey where we had this pilot organization, we tried these things. We went through 2019 was a bit of a downturn in the diamond industry. 2020 was tough all around. And so I took over Tracr within my portfolio of digital transformation in De Beers. And it was very much an organization focused on, sort of decision we made was focus on De Beers diamonds, prove that it works, earn the right to step into the industry and make the claims that we now want to make. That is, we can be the platform for the industry. So we went on that journey through the tail end of 2020 and most of 2021. In 2022, we launched in production and we started scaling it out. And that actually coincided with with Russia invading Ukraine and that war that sort of kicked off. And that has consequences for the diamond industry and obviously for the broader world. And so we started accelerating some of our ambitions and what we wanted to do. So I guess we we thought we had time. We could kind of build these things out and get the culture right and get the organization structured correctly. And you realize that you to the startup point, we had to go really fast. So we accelerated a lot of those things. And then towards the end of last year, we made the decision that Tracr is now ready to step out into the broader industry. It's sort of it's reached that point. And then I guess coming back to larger organization, I was like, well, let's just go do that. That won't take long. And sort of 6 months of governance and discussions and risk assessments, etc. And then in June at JCK, we announced that we were opening up Tracr to the wider industry. And it was at that time that I stepped across as a full-time CEO. So sort of requisite to Tracr now being a separate company with a very clear objective in the diamond industry, we felt like the need for more formal governance, full-time CEO, a board that I report into, etc. So we've made quite a lot of those changes in the last 12 months, and it's an interesting transition. I think it's something we knew we were always going to do, but it's not. In my mind, I was like, well, it's just a title change. Like nothing's really going to change, but it has been quite a significant difference in terms of the job. And I was actually joking with some of the people yesterday that sometimes I get to the end of the week and I feel like I've just got my head around, cost of living crisis, lab grown, government relationships, sanctions. I've got my head around all of these things and I'm feeling quite comfortable. Then I realize I haven't told anyone, so I then need to go and discuss with my sort of up stakeholders, the industry stakeholders, my team, etc. And so it's quite a complex job, but. It's an absolute privilege to be able to do this job in a company like Tracr that is just so unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the benefit of anyone who's listening or watching to this who's not in the diamond industry, JCK is a fairly major thing. So that was an announcement. That was a kind of a coming out moment, I suppose, for Tracr as a thing for the industry as a whole. JCK is it an annual? I think it's a major. It's the event in the diamond industry, I believe.
Yeah, there are a few. So I don't want to get into trouble and say it's the event. There are a couple. One of a handful of very important events. I think
it's probably the one that instills the most fear into the development team.
I'm going to ask you about that.
We're definitely going to follow up on that. So there's a couple. I mean, there's the sort of major events is Hong Kong, obviously for the Eastern market, and then JCK for the Western market. JCK is a publication, it's an online publication that sponsors the event. I've been twice now, I think. My first, it's eye-opening. It's on American scale, just massive, with the entire diamond industry just descends in Las Vegas. But it is a good opportunity because everybody's in the same place to announce these sorts of things. So kind of worked logically to put it in that timeline. And I guess at the root of that announcement, which is important, is, well, what does that mean? We're opening up to industry. And so we've opened up to other producers, other mining companies are starting to join. We've opened up to other non-De Beers customers to join from a manufacturing point of view. And then you sort of would have seen through the year, the GIA has joined, RapNet has joined, Uni Diamonds has joined. We've got some Brilliant Earth as an online retailer in the US has joined, and we've more recently announced our collaboration with Serene. So it's really that sort of that step into being more of a coordinator of this ecosystem, which is a bit different to where we were a year and a bit ago. A year and a bit ago, we were looking at what I call a straight line value chain. So De Beers sells diamonds, they sell them, they get cut and polished into things, they go to retail and they go down. Easy problem to solve. Now we're talking about the swirls. We trade and we sell and we move on, and we have to deal with all of those things. So it's a fairly significant change from June until where we are now at JCK.
Right, and it's you've just rattled off a lot of names that if you're in the diamond industry would be very familiar, but if you're not, wouldn't be. But we won't go over all of them, but we're talking about an ecosystem of players. You mentioned Uni Diamonds there, which is a marketplace, equally technology-driven, relatively new company in the industry that in which you can trade diamonds. People can supply diamonds to that marketplace and people can buy diamonds from that marketplace. Now they have the benefit in that example of a Tracr logo that says, you're not just buying a diamond, you're buying the story of that diamond. You know what it is. And that is, I guess, what represents the fundamental change that Tracr represents. That's why it represents a difference in what the industry itself actually is. And I think once you understand that, from my perspective as an outsider anyway, you start to understand the scale of the ambition that Tracr actually has. But let's just bring all that back down again. I'm interested in finding out maybe some of the stories that you'd be willing to tell about the journey that you've been on to achieve that ambition, right? Because I bet it hasn't been as smooth as all of you speakers are. So what can you tell us? Let's let me think. I've written down a few words here based on previous conversations. Macintosh type computers. What does this mean? Maybe I should address that to the CTO.
Macintosh.
Yeah, see,
computers.
it's good that she looks at you like you're mad, because it just shows that we've been we sort
You've
of
overcome
protecting
the
the team from the madness that is that is that. So. And no,
Why was it a problem?
Yeah,
I guess
Caroline,
that's the question.
maybe don't get upset with me, but we hire a lot of really talented developers, and they're quite specific about some of the things they want, and one of which is they don't want to work on a Windows machine, and so they generally want to work on Mac, or which is the Apple computer, or Linux, for that matter, which is absolutely fine. However, De Beers at the time and Anglo American at the time didn't have a group policy for Macs. And so when you're trying to look at putting a security image on these things to manage them, et cetera, there wasn't a policy, there wasn't a process. And I think we have a very open door policy at Tracr, and we want people to come around. We're not a smoke and mirrors company. Anybody can come through the door and ask questions and talk and dig into the tech. And we had some people visiting, and I think they saw all the Macs, and they had a little mini panic about these Macs, and so I had to. Fortunately, within De Beers, Debbie Vermark, who's the CIO of De Beers, is a very good friend, but also an incredible CIO, and safe to say she has our back. But it was many phone calls and many discussions to make sure we're understanding, and then I think you can see the benefits. So. As painful as that was, to then be like, well, we're on the leading edge now of implementing a policy that can be reused. It's a really good example from an organization point of view to take sort of a smaller subset. The people using the Macs, they're not my 95-year-old granny. They're not going to click on all the links. They know what they're doing, right? They're developers, and so the risk is really low. But we could then start rolling out permission-based things, updates, etc., locking the laptops down without locking them down, and then using that as a blueprint for Anglo American or De Beers as they'd want to use it. But it's one of those, you're just going through your week, and it's quite busy, and things are going on, and then all of a sudden this pops up in your diary, and you've got to kind of run around and deal with it, which is again, in a startup, it just wouldn't be something that you'd have to deal with. So I'm glad Caroline just thinks, they're just Macs, it's not a problem. That's good. That means I'm doing my job.
I see. So another note that we've written down here is that you're kind of just thought of as the IT guys. Is that in relation? What is that? What does that mean?
I think every now and then I get brought onto some calls with the wider De Beers group, and I'm like, I'm not entirely sure I'm entirely relevant on this call, because we're just sort of discussing deploying stuff into AWS, and I'm like, okay, but yeah, I think there's a kind of view that Tracr is, IT people, and that's sort of what we do. And I think we do a lot more than that. But I mean, I think it offends Jason a bit more than it offends me. I'm like, whatever, we're the IT guys, at least we've got a reputation. It's a good thing they're talking about us.
We should introduce Jason, by the way. Jason isn't in the room, but when we talk about Jason, we are talking about...
Yeah, Jason McIntosh is our Chief Operating Officer. He's been with us, I think, him and Julian. Julian's our Integration and Support Director. And I guess we should talk about Dave Anderson's our CFO, and Manu is our head of business development. So that's kind of our senior leadership team, SLT, is something like that. But Jason has been with me on the journey since I took over right in the beginning and before that. And we sort of play the game of stepping in for each other when things get quite tough, and when you need a bit of a break and things are a bit hard, we kind of shuffle around and play that kind of that role of, not to say protecting, but almost just sort of insulating some of the core engineering team from some of these examples, right? And making sure we're sort of managing what filters down so they don't get too distracted by the work that's going on.
There is to be honest, Tracr is a good example in terms of running an agile program, and so I won't be surprised when De Beers calls up saying that how do you do it, because again it's what Tracr is trying to do in terms of the ways of working and the approach is not very much in terms of how De Beers has operated in the past. So there is a learning from Tracr into De Beers in terms of how the collaboration tools, the tech stack, how do you set it up. So I won't be, I'm not really surprised when Caroline, you get called out to say, how are you doing?
So they are the IT guys.
It's IT guys is wrong. Yeah, they've got engineers. So and it's good to take basically use the best practices that's in other places and spread it across the organization. So
yeah, I mean, Hilary, you've got a slightly wider view across De Beers in terms of innovation in a general sense. And obviously, I think from what we've been talking about today already, there's quite a lot of that going on within De Beers. So would you say it's true that Tracr is something, I don't want to say it is something that it isn't, but it sounds like it might be a bit of a beacon of the art of the possible that may be inspirational around the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I suppose if you go back to De Beers' history, they created a category. So I think innovation is in the DNA of De Beers. And innovation can be technical, and innovation can be product, and innovation can be things we now all believe. So so if you look at the history, De Beers stands for having brought that luxury product, special moment, market as being something that across the world people celebrate milestones with diamonds. So that's probably the pioneering innovation of De Beers over time. But when it leans more into technology, there's been obviously the fantastic work of Tracr, but De Beers also innovates quite a broad range of things. So through their Ignite teams, there is also innovation done across the actual hardware and machinery, which is used during the mining process. So whether that's in terms of extraction of diamonds out of the ground, or as you move through sorting and processing, and then as you go on into downstream, there are other innovation projects which myself and Vinod have been engaged with across some of the approaches for bringing more data and scanning techniques into the diamond midstream processing. So there's been a lot of investment and consideration in that end. And the thing that I think has been really interesting is the kind of holistic way that De Beers have begun to engage around innovation, and they've really embraced the idea that innovation is a cross-disciplinary sport. And if you are doing innovation just with tech, it's unlikely to scale because no one wants to buy it or no one wants to use it. And if you do innovation just with customers, you're going to design something that cannot be built. And we have all gotten that design, and you're like, well, that's never happening. But you must, innovation in corporates, innovation is it has a purpose. It is there to drive bottom line revenue. So understanding that commercial outcome and ensuring that you are building for a sustainable future, which is sustainable not only in terms of the product and the processes behind it, but also sustainable in terms of being self-supporting in terms of revenue generation and the profit is also a part of it. So I think that's what is, for me, the most encouraging thing about innovating with De Beers is that it is really holistic. And personally, I get to work with such a broad range of stakeholders because it's really understood that to build the future of the organization, it is going to take everyone pulling in the same direction. And Tracr is a leader in that journey, but there are lots of parts across the organization making moves to define and establish what it is going to be a diamond producer in the 21st century.
Yeah, and I think that might be a good thing for us to just sort of round off our conversation with, actually. It's just a reminder of what this actually means. And I have been lucky enough to spend a whole day here understanding, I think, a bit more about not just Tracr and De Beers, but the diamond industry as a whole. And perhaps I reflect the mindset that anyone outside of the diamond industry might actually generically have, which is, I've seen movies featuring Leonardo DiCaprio where I end up with this kind of negative vision of what the diamond industry is. Now, that's kind of old news, and we know that. But what the diamond industry actually is, and when we're talking about sustainability, is something that sustains very real communities and develops those communities in all sorts of different parts of the world. It's a positive story that I know the diamond industry as a whole is keen to tell. But if Tracr succeeds, which I think it looks like it's well on the way to doing, it doesn't really need to even try to tell the story because every diamond comes packaged with its own story at that point. But Wes, maybe you can just paint that picture for us. What does the diamond industry mean to the communities involved? And then how is Tracr actually going to be able to help tell that story?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it because it is a little bit of why we do what we do. It's not just for technology's sake, and it's not just for provenance and traceability, etc. So the and having come from the mining industry in Africa and traveled all over Africa, and I'm quite close to, you know, the concept of mines in communities that are impoverished. So there's probably three things that I think are important when we talk about the diamond industry. I think the first is that they have this unique example that De Beers has driven with Botswana of a true public-private partnership, and I think you'd find it really difficult to find an example like that anywhere else in the world, where there is a joint venture in Botswana called Debswana, 50-50 share of the two mines, the best mines in the world from a diamond point of view. They've been around for 40, 50 years, and the communities around there and the benefit, the sheer amount of socioeconomic development and the money that goes into those areas is completely disproportionate compared to every other industry. So, you know, bringing it to Tracr, Tracer's job is to link the purchase you make in Bond Street or in Fifth Avenue or, you know, in Hong Kong back to the fact that these diamonds came from somewhere and they made an incredibly positive impact to a whole lot of people. In Botswana, the per capita GDP, the number of of tar roads in the area, the schools, the clinics, the National Geographic partnerships for land conservation, and the list goes on and on and on. And so Tracer's goal is to kind of link those two things together, and I think that's the first part of what we're trying to do. That's helpful because we're funded by De Beers, and that's where we've kind of started. But those diamonds, they get cut and polished. Every single diamond is hand cut and polished. You know, we talk about artisanal. There isn't much more artisanal than that. And these people who have spent their entire lives, sometimes 2-3 generations, cutting and polishing diamonds in places like India, in Antwerp, and even in New York. It's a skill that's been handed down, and in those areas, the amount of investment in sustainability and water conservation and land conservation and women in sort of engineering fields and investment and all these sorts of things is really quite incredible. And that's the joy of linking the value chain. Is Tracr is then being able to tell that story, and so you sort of package these two things together, and then I think the third that's quite fascinating is we talk about sustainability a lot, and yes, there is Leonardo DiCaprio's movies, etc., but there's also this concept of mining, and mining being dirty and digging holes, and it is interesting. I mean, diamonds do come from under the ground. They're in kimberlite pipes and they're formed over millions of years. But what's interesting about a diamond is it's not fast fashion. It's forever. So you may buy the diamond, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the sort of carbon or water impact of a diamond is about the same as 3 pairs of jeans. So you take a 1 carat polished diamond, 3 pairs of jeans,
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, how long does 3 pairs of jeans last you compared to how long a diamond would last you?
I think it depends what you're doing.
Well,
if you're wearing them to mine diamonds, then maybe not very long.
Yeah, well, I think Levi would have something to say about that, right?
So it's an average pair of jeans.
It's the cost to manufacture 3 pairs of jeans is the same carbon footprint as a diamond. And realistically, you'll buy 10, 20, 30, 40 pairs of jeans in your life, where you'll buy 1 or 2 diamonds in your life. And so, Tracr's ability to add the digital element to a diamond, the digital attraction to the diamond, and then really use that as something that the next generation will fall in love with diamonds, because they can take them downstream into the metaverse, into these places, and then knowing that it's an ethical purchase, it's a good purchase is quite important. And there's over 10 million people that are employed globally in the diamond industry that rely on those purchases that are made, and so it's a little bit of what we're doing is quite important to support those communities that are not in first world countries. They're in emerging markets that require our support.
Yeah. And there's also the other part to that, where after a mine is closed, there's a lot of work that De Beers does in order to make sure that the kind of environment of the area after the mine is closed is looked after, that communities there don't fall to pieces. And I don't know if other mining companies do that. I don't know how common that is, but I've always been very impressed by the people that I speak to within De Beers who do the mine closure, just the conversations that they're having, and it's really quite lovely. And if Tracr can kind of be a part of that, and because what we do for people is amazing, but also biodiversity is unbelievably important, and I think it's really good that we can contribute to that in some way.
And it really is meaningful. So I was we've had several projects over the last few years which have touched on sustainability and so forth, and often when I have a Gen Z, because they are now an active part of the workforce, come and join the project, they're like, no way, I'm going to want a natural diamond. I'm like, okay, cool. Come back to me at the end of 6 or 12 weeks or however long you're on the project and tell me if your perception is still lab grown or natural. And they all come back and go, the work that De Beers does, and then the ability to communicate that changes their perception. So while yeah, while that film is a long time ago, the need to continue to educate and to shine a light on what De Beers is doing to support communities and more further in terms of some of the carbon initiatives is really important, because you are essentially trying to tell a story to the whole world. And I suppose in some way the competition for that is actually Netflix. Like you are trying to communicate something in stores where the information for other people has been picked up on like mass media platforms. So it's a really interesting challenge that De Beers have set themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to round things off, I guess, Caroline, we were talking earlier about how important these issues are to you personally in terms of sustainability, and making sure that not only are you doing the best you can on a personal level against those topics, but that actually you're contributing the lion's share of your every working day, if you're going to be working somewhere, making sure you're doing that in an organization that's actually married to those same values. And you wouldn't be here as CTO of Tracr if that wasn't true. And I'm going to commit this to you on the record now, and we spoke about maybe you contributing an article to the techforgood.net platform for us about that, because it's an interesting thing, that intersection between, obviously your very highly developed technical skills and using them in a way that actually ultimately is going to benefit people and their environment all around the world. So on that note, I think I'll bring things to a close. So if you want to read that article from Caroline, see more of this, some more video that we've made today, some more articles, all sorts of good stuff, come to techforgood.net. In the meantime, I'll say goodbye, and if you guys would like to say goodbye as well, this might be slightly awkward.
We do all at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can do it at the same time.
Bye.
And thank you.